cold and dreary and sometimes a little rainy or icy. And if the truth be known, I think I'd rather just throw another log on the fire and crank my lazy boy into third gear and stay home. But I've never made the effort to get with other Christians on a night like that or a night like this, that when I left to go home, I wasn't glad I made the effort to come. Amen? And I'm glad to be a part of our service tonight. Thank you for braving the cold and the dreary and the damp and the dark and to come and to worship with us tonight. Thank you so very, very much. It's good to be with all of you again this evening. I enjoyed talking with Sister Jean Gurley last night and again this evening. She and I go way back to Virginia back in the early 1980s. And it's good to reconnect with her once again. Her family were very special. And then there's Bob Hutto. I was coming into a hospital in Birmingham a few years ago, and there was a guy coming out. And I was with my wife, and we kind of passed each other and kind of looked funny at each other. And we walked a little bit, and I said, man, that guy looks just like Bob Hutto. I didn't think there could possibly be two people that looked like him. And sure enough, he turned around, and I guess he thought the same thing about me. And so we connected again, and so it's good to see Bob. We were classmates. We went to school together in the previous century. That's true. So it's good to see him again, rekindle that relationship and friendship. My Bible's open tonight to the 90th Psalm. Would you open your Bible there? Psalm 90 and verse 10. Psalm 90 and verse 10. The psalmist says, as for the days of our life, they contain 70 years, or if due to strength, 80 years. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for soon it is gone, and we fly away. Life just doesn't last very long. It's very brief, he says. Skip down to verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may present unto thee a heart of wisdom. Make every day count. Teach us to number our days. Well, you've had another year, and you've had another birthday somewhere in it. You probably made another trip to a restaurant where the servers all gathered around your table and sang off key, and they did so with pretend enthusiasm. These birthdays seem to come and go, and it just seems they begin to pile up. And you thought that the big 3-0 was something. Wait till you hit the big 4-0, and then the big 5-0, and then the big 6-0, and we'll stop right there. I think sometimes we just need to take the Buzz Lightyear approach to aging that just says to infinity and beyond, you know? But here's the question. The question, ladies and gentlemen, is not where you are on the age range spectrum of life. That's not the question. The question is, wherever you are on the age range spectrum of life, what are you doing now? What are you doing today to capture significance with your life? It's not counting your days as much as it is making your days count for something that is bigger than you are. I think most people want to have a life like that. I think most people want to have a life that has meaning, a life that has purpose, a life that is more than just getting up every day and going through the daily mundane minutia of life. I think people want a life that is more than just that. But how do I get it? And what is it? And where is it? Let me make a book recommendation for you. And the book recommendation I would like to make for you is this book right here. This book will give you a reason to live. This book will give your life purpose. This book will fuel your life creativity. This book will give you clarity. This book will ignite your passion for living. And you will begin to live a life on purpose because you will learn. You will learn that the secret to a happy life and the secret to a significant, driven life is to embrace the principle of Jesus that says it is more blessed to give than to receive. It is to live a life outside of yourself. And yet that very concept, that very thinking is very strange in our 21st century narcissistic culture. Look with me in the 19th chapter of Matthew. In Matthew chapter 19 and beginning in verse 16, Jesus confronts an individual who had that mindset. That mindset that says it's all about me. In Matthew chapter 19 and verse 16, someone came to him and said, "Teacher, what good thing shall I do that I may obtain eternal life?" And he said unto him, "Why are you asking me about what is good? There is only one who is good. But if you wish to enter into life, keep the commandments." Just do what God says. Verse 18. And then he said, "Which ones?" Does that not strike you as odd? That Jesus says you need to keep the commandments, and he says, well, which ones? Listen, the teachings of God are not like the buffet at Golden Corral or a place like that. That's not what this is. And so Jesus said, okay, here's some. You shall not commit murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So Jesus gave him some of the commandments. And the young man said unto him in verse 20, all these things I have kept. What am I still lacking? I've done all of those. I can check that one off, and I can check that one off, and I can check that one off, and that one, and that one, and that one. I've done all of these. Well, I tell you, he may have done them all regarding to the letter of the law, but I doubt he fulfilled all of them in heart. And Jesus knew his heart. Jesus could read his heart. And so Jesus said to him in verse 21, well, if you wish to be complete, go and sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasures in heaven, and come and follow me. Why did Jesus tell him to do that? Why did Jesus tell this man, of whom we just simply know as the rich young ruler, why did Jesus tell him, go sell all your stuff and give to the poor? Why did he do that? Because to this young man, life was all about one person. Life was all about self. And ladies and gentlemen, that's how a lot of people live. Life is all about them. They have the mindset that says, I want it all, and I want it now, and I want it all, and I want it now for me. And so life becomes all about fame and fortune and how many friends I can have on social media. Those are the things that matter the most to a lot of people. And here's my question. Is that the mindset that we as parents are communicating to our kids? Because if it is, if that is the mindset we are communicating to our kids, then we have failed miserably, because we have failed to teach our children the real meaning of life. May I take a few moments of your time tonight and just talk a little bit about helping build significance into the lives of your kids? You know, from the time our children are very small, during their formative years, if we as parents are not very, very careful, we can very quickly enroll them in the rat race of life. I think of the K through 12 years, which often becomes a rat race. Even as early as elementary school, a rat race to get our kids into school, to make sure they have good grades. Because the American success formula is crystal clear. You got to get great grades so you can get in a great school, so you can get a great job, so you can get a great life. And along the way, nobody ever stops to ask the elephant in the room question. And the elephant in the room question is, why? In other words, what is the real purpose of it all? What is the meaning of it all? There was a California student that got the perfect score on the SAT. Perfect score. And Stanford University in Palo Alto, California, rolled out the red carpet to her. Free ride. And some insightful reporter interviewed her. And this reporter asked this very simple question. The reporter asked, "What do you think is the meaning of life?" And her response was, "I have no idea." I have no idea. But then again, most people don't have any idea. Most kids don't have any idea because most of their parents don't have any idea. Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of the formative years of our children is not to set them up so that we can get them into the right university. The purpose of the formative years in the lives of our children is to prepare our young people for life, to help them to be able to answer the question, what is the purpose of life? And the purpose of life is many-faceted. You could say, well, one of the purposes of life is to help our children find meaningful work, to help steer them in a certain direction, some area they're passionate about, some area they're excited about, to combine their talent and passion and opportunities and provide a clear path for them. That's part of the purpose of life. Yeah, it is. And part of the purpose of life is to find relationships to nurture, to help our children understand that relationships and people come before money and profits. That's part of the purpose of life. Part of the purpose of life is to find a cause to embrace that is bigger than yourself, a way that as you live your life, you can continue to give back. That's part of the purpose of life. But I tell you, beyond all of those things, the purpose of life is summed up at the end of that book of wisdom called Ecclesiastes. When the writer had experimented in so many different areas, looking for purpose and looking for satisfaction, and he ends by saying the conclusion is, when all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, because there's going to be a day of accountability. You see, that's what we need to be teaching our kids. That's what we need to be helping them find. In the book of Micah, I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you get there. I'm going to give you time to get there. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. I know when preachers usually talk about something out of the minor prophets, we don't bother, because by the time we get there, he'll be gone. So, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah. It's right kind of in the middle of the minor prophets. Micah chapter 6 and verse 8. If this verse isn't highlighted, underlined, marked in your Bible, it should be. Micah 6 and verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? What does God want from me as I live my life? He says, but to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with your God. Let me ask you a question. Where do you think our children are going to learn how to do that? Are they going to learn how to do that from their peers? Are they going to learn how to do that through social media? Are they going to learn how to do that through the educational system? Here's a question for you. Are they going to learn how to do that by spending an hour and a half in a Bible class over the course of a week? Is that where they're going to learn how to do all of that? Hardly. The average American kid spends 7 hours a day plugged in to a device. Did you know that? The average American teenager sends 3,147 text messages per month, over 100 per day. I think that is probably a low estimate. 97% of American teenagers are allowed to have electronic devices in their bedrooms. And by the way, pediatricians are now coming out in print in the forefront and saying that that is an absolute no-no, because they're treating all of these young people across the nation and giving them various and sundry diagnoses, when really the problem is, as one pediatrician said, sleep deprivation. These kids go into their room, the parents go into their room, the parents go to sleep, and the kid stays awake because the kid's plugged in half the night. Our kids are plugged in and tuned out at an alarming rate. And as a result, peer world has replaced parent world as the primary influence in their lives. And you could argue successfully so that that's always been the case to a degree, but never as it is in our day of technology. And so somehow, in some way, as moms and dads who take serious the responsibility that God has given us to parent, somehow in some way we have to create an alternative culture. And where's that going to happen? Ladies and gentlemen, there's only one place it can happen, and that's at home. In Deuteronomy chapter 6, and beginning in verse 7, Moses says, "You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead, and you shall write them on the doorpost of your gates and on your house," he says. Here is Moses standing up in front of this generation of young families. You say, how do you know they were young families? Well, I think all the older people have died in the wilderness. Remember? So Moses stands here before all of these young families, and he gives to every one of them some homework. And he says, you better teach your kids diligently. Raising our kids to know about respect and virtue and character and God is not some kind of parental extra credit assignment that God gives to us. It is mandatory. Look back in verse 1 of Deuteronomy chapter 6. "Now this is the commandment, the statutes, and the judgments which the Lord your God has commanded me to teach you." Moses isn't just here expressing his opinion. Moses said, God has commanded me to talk to you parents about this. So raising our kids to love and honor God first rather than self first is essential. Raising them to understand that the world does not revolve around them will become paramount to their life success. Raising them to understand that it is more blessed to give than to receive will equip them in life to a higher calling and a higher purpose than the way most live. What is the meaning of life? Good question. I can tell you what it's not. It's not how you look. It's not how many friends you have on social media. It's not your GPA. It's not how musically inclined you are. It's not how athletic you are. It's none of those things. Because the meaning of life deals with the central question. The central question, are you committed to the Creator? Do you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And that's the assignment. That's the parental responsibility that God gives to all of us. Now, you're not going to get any help from culture. And you're not going to get any help from other parents. And sometimes you don't get a lot of help from other parents who are Christians. But that's the assignment. And what Moses wants to know is, are you as the mom and the dad, are you as the parents setting the example before them? Look in verse 4, Deuteronomy 6 and verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Verse 5, you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your might. And these words which I'm commanding you today shall be on your heart. Who is the your? It's the parents. It's the parents. Before he ever says a word to them about teaching your children diligently when they sit in your house and when they walk by the way and when they lie down and when they rise up, before he ever gets to that, he says, you, mom and dad, have to set the example. Because if you're not committed to the Creator and you don't have a relationship with the Lord Jesus Christ, then how in the world can you expect your children to have the same? Kids are resilient. Kids can handle just about anything. But I will tell you, there is one thing that children cannot handle, and it is hypocrisy. And kids can spot hypocrisy a mile away. And so Moses is telling these parents, you got to be real. You got to be real. And he says in verse 2, so that you and your son and your grandson might fear the Lord your God and keep his statutes. Now that's odd, because Moses is talking to a lot of people that don't have grandchildren. Now, some were old enough to have them, but he's talking to a lot of people, they don't have grandchildren. And he says to these couples, these families, he says, you need to think about your grandchildren. You say, well, I don't have any grandchildren. Well, you're not any different than them. Moses said, I want you to think about not only your kids, but I want you to think about that one day your kids are going to have kids. And I want you to think about those kids. I want you to think about lives that are yet unborn. And his message to them is the same as to us, that what we do now will be a great determining factor as to whether or not our grandchildren, yet unborn, will know the Lord. Now, if you take all the teaching here in these first few verses of Deuteronomy chapter 6, and you look at it, what Moses is telling the children of Israel is, when you occupy the land of Canaan, whatever you do, do not let culture take over your family. Don't let that happen. And I wonder why God has preserved this, if the same lesson isn't for us. Because as moms and dads, we have to shake off the shackles of complacency. And we've got to connect with our kids while we still have time. And while we're on the subject, are we teaching our kids, according to Micah, are we teaching our kids humility, to walk humbly with God? Or are we continually trying to puff up their self-esteem? I mean, we live in an era when parents go overboard with their kids' self-esteem. And there has to be a balance between the two. I understand that. But maybe sometimes what our kids need more is to understand how to be humble. I came across this the other day. A third grade class. The students in the third grade class were asked to describe themselves with three words. One little boy wrote, third grade, he wrote, I am awesome. I am special. I am genius. 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 I don't think self-esteem was his problem. So how are we going to do it? How are we going to teach our children to walk humbly in an era of narcissism? How are we going to teach our kids to be respectful when we live in a culture that is so disrespectful? How are we going to do it? So I'm going to leave you tonight with 5 things. So if you got something to write on, and you're going to need something to write on, get something to write on. I'm going to leave you with 5 things that I want you to remember. 5 things I want you to remember. Y'all got something to write on? You good? Y'all good? Got something to write on? Huh? Good? You ready? You excited? 5 things. Number 1. Here we go. There's 5 things that I think we need to do to make sure this happens. 5 ways to make it happen. Number 1. Y'all ready to write? Write this down. Chores. C-H-O-R-E-S. Chores. Got it? Chores. Require your children to participate in age-appropriate chores. As they grow up in the family, there's things they can do in the family. There's ways they can contribute to the family. Even when they're small, they can learn to do simple things like pick up their toys or their clothes or make their bed. They can help mom set the table and do various things in the kitchen. As they get older, they can feed the pets. As they get older, they can mow the lawn. As they get older, they can take out the trash and do all kinds of things like that. And what we do with our kids is we're teaching them life lesson 101, that in the process, to help them understand that the world does not revolve around them. I have a friend who is a therapist up in Limestone County, working with children of adoption who have attachment issues and various and sundry things. And she is just excellent. And she and I were talking one day, and she was telling the story about a mom that she knew whose son she had asked to clean up his room. And he said, I'll clean it up. I'll clean it up today, and I'll get it done. And she knew that it was going to be time to go to soccer practice. And when it came time to go to soccer practice, he bounded down the stairs and said, "Come on, Mom, we got to go to soccer practice." And she knew he had not cleaned up his room. And so she sat there with a magazine in her hands, and she said to him, without looking up and without raising her voice, she said to him, "I only take boys to soccer practice who've cleaned their room." And he laughed and he said, "Oh, come on, Mom, we're going to be late. We need to hurry up and go." And she said, "I only take boys to soccer practice who've cleaned their room." And he said, "Mom, quit joking around. If we don't get to soccer practice on time, I'm going to have to run laps after practice is over. I can't be late." And she said, without raising her voice or her eyes, "I only take boys to soccer practice who've cleaned their room." And she said an amazing thing happened. He marched right back upstairs. And she said, "I heard the sound of a piece of equipment that I haven't heard in a long time, the vacuum cleaner." And he vacuumed his room, and he cleaned up his room, and he came back downstairs, and she took him to soccer practice, and they were late, and she stayed until after he ran all those laps. I want to tell you what, that's a parent being a parent. That is a parent being a parent. When our kids turned 16, we had a big birthday celebration for all of them. When they turned 16, they all understood one thing, that we were giving to them the keys to the washing machine. That when they turned 16, it was a rite of passage in our house that from that point on, they would do their own laundry. It is amazing to me that the young people of our day are experts at anything that plugs in except a washing machine. Have you noticed that? And it's really not that complicated. So if we're going to raise up our children in the right way, one of the things that we have to help integrate them into society is to integrate them into the family by doing chores, by making a contribution. Secondly, unplug those devices. Monitor them. Social media and phones and all of that sort of thing have a positive role, but not if taken to an excess. It can become an unhealthy addiction. I know a family that has a day every week, they call it No Tech Tuesdays, in which they decided on Tuesdays they're not going to engage in anything that's plugged in. They just take a break from all of that. During the summer when it's warm, they do stuff outside. During the winter when it's cold, they play games. But whatever, they do not engage in anything that is plugged in. My friend Sean Bain, who runs the Florida College camp up in Dixon, Tennessee, has all the kids turn their phones in when they first come to camp. And he said it's like withdrawals. He says because some of these kids don't know how to interact. They don't know how to FaceTime with real FaceTime. They don't understand how to do that. Don't let social media, don't let technology just take over your life and take over the lives of your kids. Don't let that happen. Third, eat together as a family. Eat together as a family. Of all the pieces of furniture that we have in our house, the most valuable piece of furniture is an old oak table. That is our kitchen table. It is where the family gathers and has gathered for years. And we eat supper together, and we talk together, and we linger together, and we laugh together, and we share together. I told you we had adopted these 3 teenagers, and they've never had a home before. They've never had a family before. They've never ate dinner with a mom and dad before. And we'll sit there and we'll eat, and dinner will long be over, and they don't want to get up and leave because it's just a very meaningful time for them. And I'll tell you what else we do after dinner. We journal. All 3 of them have a journal, and they get it out, and mom has a journal, and she gets it out, and I have a journal, and I get it out. And for 30 minutes after dinner, we sit there and we write in our journal. And the first line in our journal is, today I feel, and then they have to fill in the blank, and then they have to write a page. And then we all read what we wrote and talk about it and share. And I want to tell you, it's something that they've gotten used to and they look forward to. What are we doing? We're connecting as a family. We're finding areas in which we need to talk about and be together and enjoy and learn. That's important. Number 4, don't overschedule them. Don't overschedule them. As a culture, we are so into organized activities. We do to our children what we complain about people doing to us, and that is we get overloaded. We turn around and do the same thing to them. Help your kids understand they can't do everything. And so they're going to have to be selective. And whatever you select, don't let it become your master. And don't let it steal the most important thing of all. And that is your spiritual priorities. And number 5, get outside and do something together as a family. I read a story about a dad who was having a lot of trouble with his teenage son. So he took off work. It was in the winter, and he took off work. And he got his boy. He was off school, and he got his boy and said, "Come on, we're gonna you and me, we're gonna take a trip together." And so the boy didn't really want to go, so he went along reluctantly. And the dad takes the boy, and they drive way up into the mountains, and they're going to go on a winter tubing trip. And he said, my son sat there all the way up to the mountains, and his face was turned toward the window, would not engage me in conversation, headphones on, listening to his music, and he said, we drove all the way up there for 2 hours like that. And he said, I'm thinking to myself, this is a waste of my time. He said, we get out of the car, we go buy our lift tickets, we get ready to get our tubes and ride up the lift. And he said, still, I'm getting nothing from him. And he says, we finally go down the very first time, we go down the hill, and still, he said, I'm getting nothing from him. And I thought to myself, what a waste. We might as well just go home. And he said, as they were going back up the lift the second time, he said his son looked at him and said, hey, Dad, you're not going to beat me down this time. And he said, from that moment on, everything changed. And he said, we ended up having one of the best days of our lives. Just my boy and me and the mountain. And he said, all the way home, he didn't listen to his headphones. We talked, and we had a blast. My family and I, we like Hike Inn in North Georgia. You can Google it, Hike, Hikeinn, Hike Inn. It's 5 miles into the inn, and the cool thing about it is it's not like Mount LeConte, it's level. But it's the same deal as Mount LeConte. And my kids love that. And we love that. Because, and don't bother taking your cell phone, and it's not going to work. you just get away and get with your family and reconnect with your kids. I hate golf. But our youngest son, Luke, fell in love with the game of golf. And I learned that if I wanted to spend time with my son, I needed to play golf. So I saved up my money and bought a real expensive set of golf clubs that play it against sports. I paid $99 for this great set of golf clubs. And he and I have gone all over the United States, and we've played golf together in different places. And he keeps score for good reason. I don't for good reason. In fact, every hole I get a 5. He'll say, Dad, what'd you get on that hole? 5. What'd you get on that hole? 5. And I'll say, look at there, my ball's sitting right next to yours, right in the middle of the fairway. He said, Dad, you've hit yours twice. But I don't care. It's just the two of us and just having fun. In 1995, I bought a 71 Chevy pickup, paid $1,600 for it cash. And I brought that thing home, and Julie cried. She said, You've wasted $1,600 on that piece of junk. It was primer gray. But the body was good, the engine was strong, and our son at the time, Dale, was 14. And that became his baby. And little by little, as we got a little money, we painted it cherry red. We put new tires on it. We put straight pipes on that thing. And when he was 16, I threw him the keys, and he drove Big Red all through high school. And we lived in a little bitty town. And I could hear him coming from across town. And I tell him today, I know the reason you went into law enforcement was because you spent so much time with law enforcement growing up as a teenager. Crystal used to love horses. We would take her to the rodeo. And she'd come home, and we'd bought an old horse. I called it a Tennessee walking horse. We lived in Tennessee, and all that old horse wanted to do was walk. But we'd go to the rodeo, and we'd come home, and Crystal would get 2 of those big Rubbermaid trash cans, and she'd put it out in the field, and she would try to barrel race that old horse. And that old horse would look at me with a look that said, please don't take her to any more rodeos. But that's what she liked. All of our kids, just like all of your kids, they're all different. Find out what each one of them, find out what makes each one tick, and then do some things with them. Because the window of opportunity is very brief. And you only got one shot. Moses said to those families, don't let culture destroy your families. Don't let it happen. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to take that to heart. Don't let culture happen to your kids either. Build significance in their lives. We sing the song of invitation tonight. And we invite you to become a Christian, to become part of the family, listen to the terminology, to become part of the family of God by being born again. You can do that tonight by being buried in baptism for the remission of your sins. If we can help you in any way, if we can encourage you in any way, if we can sit down and study with you, there's people here who would be more than happy to do that. But if you need to come tonight, we certainly would encourage that. And we invite you right now while we stand together and we sing together. There is room in the kingdom of God.